Devin Crosswell with Sherpa Design, and we're going to take a quick look at synchronous assemblies within NX. Here I have an assembly open and I need to design something for the top of my cab component. However, the cab component is in a constant state of redesign, so I need to be flexible and fast. To do this, I will incorporate the wave geometry linker in combination with the synchronous assemblies capability. First, I'll create and directly add a brand new component using new component. I can name this, change the layer it's on, where it's positioned, but it will be added to my assembly navigator, the component tree at the bottom here, and it will exist as a new component within my assembly. If I open that component within its own window, it's just a new component that I can work with. It was dropped in at the absolute coordinate system, and the reason I'm adding a new component in this manner is so that I can wave link in other aspects of this cab component to design around. In order to do that, I'm going to make this the work part. You'll notice the components in the assembly become de-emphasized. That's because I'm in the context of the new model component, and I'll probably rename that at some point. Using Wave Geometry Linker, I'm going to go ahead and link in an aspect, an object, or feature from another component, this cab component. I'm going to do so with the faces of this part. So I want something that sits right on top, but maybe leans over the front just a little bit. So I need that front face as well. And so I'm going to click on those three, click OK, and then I will have that added if I highlight this model component as an aspect of that new part. I'll now go into that new part and I'll design something going to my home tab, use my extrude tool. I'll refresh that, and then from the center plane I will add in something that sits right on top. Maybe it has to look like this. So instead of subtracting from that, I'm just going to create its own geometry, its own body. And because I can see clearly the length of the top of the cab, I can create something that spans the distance right there. I'll click OK. I have a solid body. I now want to make sure that I trim it to fit. And I need to get rid of this opening. So I'm going to go to my Surface tab, and a tool called Delete Edge will quickly allow me to get rid of that opening, fill in the structure of that sheet. I can now use this as a trimming object. Go ahead to go to the Home tab, Trim Body, trimming this body that's sitting on top. I'm going to use this group of faces that I linked in. If I look at the part navigator within the context of this part, that first feature is that linked face that I created. So this is going in the wrong direction. I'm going to go ahead and reverse that. Click OK. So I've now trimmed that. And actually, I want a little bit of space. So I'm going to go back up to where that linked face is the current feature using my current feature column. I'm going to add an offset to this. We're going to go offset face. And we'll go 1 millimeter, tangent faces. I'm adding an offset there. I'll now make the trim body the active part. And so when this sits on top of that cab, I'll have a millimeter of clearance for it. Going back to that assembly, I'll make the assembly active by going to the assembly navigator, right-clicking on the assembly and making that the work part. Now I can still see in this component the linked-in sheet body, and I don't want to see that. If I right-click on this and take a look at the reference set, I'm not looking at the entire part, I am looking at the model, and that model reference set should just contain what the actual object is that I'm designing. So I'm going to go back to that model, my assemblies tab, and the reference set dialog. If I highlight that model reference set, I can shift select to remove that linked-in sheet body, because that's just a reference trim body. Go back to my assembly. That's the only thing that's being shown. Sitting there on top. Not exactly sure what that is yet, but the design is in progress. There's a little bit of clearance there. At least I think there should be. You can kind of see a millimeter clearance. And then, as I mentioned, the cab is in a constant state of design, and we can quickly design in the context of our assembly using synchronous assemblies. And synchronous assemblies in NX, we just need to label a component as a modeling component, and then I can model in the assembly space. So I'm going to click on label as modeling component, select that cab, click OK. It clearly identifies that as a modeling component. And now instead of move component, I now have a move face in the assembly. I'm going to click on move face, grab this top face. I'm going to specify a move, and I can do that using the dynamic drag handle that they've given me. I can move the handles where I need to, but in this case, I'm just going to lift it up a little bit. I'm going to rotate the top of that cab just slightly. And that's a little too much, so we're going to try that again. How about right there? Click OK. So we're adding some height to the front, kind of dip in the back. And you'll notice that my model part that is linked to that top surface and using that through Wave Geometry Linker to design updates automatically. And with this synchronous capability, I can uncheck or deselect the modeling component. Click OK. I now am not working with synchronous assemblies, just back to moving regular components as I might in my general assembly. But if I go to the cab component in its own window, you'll notice that that design change that I made at the assembly level has been made in the component itself. And if I take a look at the part navigator at the very bottom of the feature tree, there is a change face feature. If I enter into that, it'll just kind of show me what's happening there. But it gets added because of that synchronous assemblies capability. So I now have fast, synced up design capability within my assemblies in NX.